Thank you for joining me this week as we watch the made-for-TV film, Mrs. Scrooge.
To Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
You will be haunted by three spirits.
I think I'd rather not.
I'm Christmas present. Ho, ho, ho.
You may be a bit of undigested beef, a fragment of an underdone potato.
Scrooge is getting worse.
Bah humbug.
As I said at the top, this week we are looking at Mrs. Scrooge, the 1997 made-for-TV adaptation of A Christmas Carol. This version originally aired on the USA Network on December 10th, 1997, and stars Cecily Tyson as Ebenezer Scrooge. As the title suggests, this adaptation reimagines Dickens' famous miser as Ebenezer Scrooge, a wealthy banker living in Providence, Rhode Island. Several other characters are also reimagined. Jacob Marley becomes Maud Marley, Scrooge's former mentor and business partner, played by Katherine Helmond, and Scrooge's nephew Fred becomes Luke, a local minister.
My prayers are with you and Ebenezer.
The film follows the basic structure of Dickens' story, but it also tries to expand the world quite a bit by addressing modern issues like systematic poverty, racism, and the financial burden of medical care. This story opens in the Christmas season in Providence. Ebenezer Scrooge runs a successful savings and loans firm and has spent years climbing to the top of the financial world by stepping on those beneath her. She underpays her employee, refuses to provide health care, and shows little compassion for anyone who comes for her for help. Early in the film, we see her evict a struggling family on Christmas, undervalue a unique lamp brought to her by a desperate woman trying to raise bail for her son, and regularly dismiss requests from her employees for better benefits.
But what about a group health plan?
Shut it! Health plans make me sick.
In the background, you'll see one of her employees is Allegra Fulton, who would later appear in The Shape of Water. Among those other employees is Bob Cratchit, who works as her head clerk. Bob's family struggles financially, and his son suffers from a serious illness. In this version, the film actually explains Tim's condition, saying he has a slow-growing congenital tumor, and his family cannot afford the treatment that could save him. Then the film introduces Ebenezer's nephew, Luke, who has become a reverend. Despite being her only close family member, Ebenezer keeps him at distance and refuses his invitation to church or family gatherings. Then on Christmas Eve, Ebenezer returns home and is visited by the ghost of her former partner, Maud Marley. Maud herself is now condemned to walk the earth in chains forged by her own greed, and she warns Ebenezer that the same fate awaits her if she does not change. She tells Ebenezer that three spirits will visit her during the night to show her where her life went wrong. Ebenezer panics and attempts to lock herself inside the firm's vault to avoid the ghost entirely, which we've now seen on several different versions of the story. Of course, hiding in the vault does not stop the ghost. At midnight, the ghost of Christmas past arrives. This portion of the film greatly expands Ebenezer's childhood. The spirit takes her back to the deep south where she grew up in a poor but loving household. Her father is a veteran who dreams of opening a grocery store with two partners. Despite facing social barriers and financial hardship, he works tirelessly to make that business dream a success. Unfortunately, tragedy strikes when the store is firebombed and Ebenezer's father is killed while trying to save it. The family is devastated and financially ruined, forcing them to sell their family home. Years later, Ebenezer moves north to Providence looking for work. She eventually finds employment with Maud Marley's savings and loan firm, where Marley quickly recognizes her abilities and similarities and promotes her. This version does something interesting with Marley. Instead of simply warning Scrooge about greed, Maud explicitly recognizes Ebenezer's childhood trauma and fear of poverty, and as her mentor, exploits her fear and grows it into something worse, greed and emotional isolation. During this time, Ebenezer falls in love with a lawyer named Stevenson, who plans to return south to fight for civil rights and social reform. Ebenezer refuses to go with him, fearing the return of economic instability she grew up with.
I'm asking you to take a chance with me.
Why am I the one that's take the chance? To go backward.
Ebenita's former fiance, Stephen, is played by Derwin Jordan, who horror fans might recognize from Jason X, where he played Waylander, who sacrifices himself in an attempt to stop Jason Voorhees. The relationship ends, and shortly after, she learns her brother, Perry, died in the Vietnam War, leaving behind a wife and young son. The film is clearly trying to address larger themes here: racism, economic equality, generational poverty, and touches of war trauma, suggesting Ebenezer's obsession with financial security grew out of very real trauma. In fact, the film might go too far in trying to explain Scrooge's motivations. Instead of simply showing her various greed, it sometimes tries to frame her behavior as a desperate attempt to avoid ever returning to poverty again, and at times it seems to justify her greediness. After the ghost of Christmas past departs, Ebenita returns home, only to be visited by the ghost of Christmas present. This spirit shows her the lives of the people around her. She sees the Cratchit family celebrating Christmas despite their financial struggles. However, the reality of Tim's illness becomes painfully clear. Because of Ebenita's refusal to provide health care, Bob's salary is too high to qualify for financial programs, but too low to pay for Tim's life-saving surgery. The ghost then shows the family that Ebenita evicted earlier. Despite losing their home, the community has stepped up to help them in letting them stay in the school gymnasium during the holidays. Finally, the ghost brings Ebenita to Luke's church, where he delivers a sermon about compassion and the troubles of greed. Again, this film clearly wants to focus on larger issues like medical debt crisis and the healthcare system. However, by attempting to touch upon multiple issues, the message becomes out of focus. Then at 2 in the morning, the silent ghost of Christmas future appears. He is played by Julian Richings, who many genre fans will recognize from Supernatural, where he portrayed Death. The spirit shows Ebenita what will happen if she continues on her current path. In this future, Tim eventually dies because the family couldn't afford the medical treatment he needs. Bob is fired for missing work for caring for his son, and Luke, their pastor, confronts Ebenita and begs her to show compassion, but she staunchly refuses. This confrontation ultimately leads to Ebenita's death as she dies alone in the bank vault counting money. Unlike most versions of Christmas Carol, this future timeline does something unusual. The emotional focus is not on Scrooge's lonely death. Instead, the turning point becomes Tiny Tim's death, which shifts the emotional weight of the story. Rather than fearing her own annihilation and forgotten grave, Ebenita is shaken by the consequences that her action has had on others. It is an interesting choice. However, it does muddle the film's message slightly. Dickens' original story is very clear that Scrooge's fear of his own death is a major catalyst for change, while this version redirects that emotional turning point onto Tim instead. Ebenita wakes up on Christmas morning overjoyed that she's been given a second chance. She immediately tries to make things right, and here the film stays faithful to the original Dickens story, including the scene where Scrooge sends a boy to buy a turkey for the Cratchit family. However, in this modern setting, this moment feels very strange.
Listen, that supermarket on Mesa Boulevard, is it open early?
It's always open.
And buy the biggest, the most beautiful, the most delicious turkey you can find there.
This is $50.
It's not enough? We want the very best, remember?
The gesture comes directly from the Victorian story, and in the contemporary setting, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Continuing the story, she then returns the antique lamp to the desperate woman and helps her to bail out her son. She gives Bob Cratchit a large raise, a promotion within the company, and provides health insurance for her employees so that Tim can retrieve the medical attention he needs. And then, matching many other versions that we have seen, the film ends with a series of musical numbers sung by various groups, including the Cratchits,
Bring a torch to Let Isabella, bring a torch to the cradle run. It is Jesus, good folk of the village, Christ is born, and Mary's calling out.
and Luke and his congregation. This is always a bit of a tonal shift, especially in these movies which are generally musicless throughout. As an adaptation, Mrs. Scrooge is an interesting attempt to modernize A Christmas Carol. The film clearly tries to tackle larger social issues like racial inequality, systematic poverty, and financial realities of healthcare, while also expanding the backstory of many of the central characters. But in doing so, it sometimes complicates not only Dickens' original messages, but also the message that the film is attempting to tell. By giving Ebenezer such strong motivations for her behavior, the film occasionally risks justifying her greed rather than condoning it and attempting to teach a message of change. However, while this version may not be the most famous adaptation of A Christmas Carol, it does remain a solid attempt to reinterpret the tale through a modern lens. And with that, we'll close the book on this particular visit with Scrooge. I'll see you next time in another look on how filmmakers continue to reinvent Charles Dickens' most famous Christmas ghost story. See you then.
Just go, but be here all the earlier the next day.
Finally, the ghost of Ebenezer. Whoa.